Perfect. Cool. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me today. Hope you had a good event so far, and hoping we can make the next 30 minutes as interesting as the previous sessions. My name is Stijn. I'm an analytical lead for Google. I work together in a team that's based partially here in Vilnius and partially in Hamburg, covering the largest advertisers in the Baltics, Belarus, Bulgaria, as well as Kazakhstan. So those are the markets we cover. Personally, I focus on gaming and FinTech clients, primarily based in Belarus and Bulgaria. So those are my top customers are located there, and those are the two industries that I work with. Let's see, my role. So in addition to working with the largest advertisers and kind of helping with user acquisition, user retention as our two kind of core pillars, in recent months especially, we've started focusing more and more on lifetime value, focusing on measurement, cohort analyses, and helping clients basically understand their data, understand their users, and basically understand what they can do with this data. We notice there's a big trend, especially recently, in clients asking questions, trying to understand how they can spend their marketing budgets better. And we're trying to accommodate this by people specializing in specifically lifetime value and cohort analyses. And that's me for the region. Today we'll cover exactly that topic. So the session today will be about lifetime value. We'll do a quick intro. We'll talk about how lifetime value is valuable for your business in marketing, but also in other divisions and parts of the business. I'll talk about a few examples, how the industry does things, not just in gaming, also in travel, for example, or in finance. And we'll wrap up with a few tips and tricks, a few resources that you can use to start with lifetime value in your business tomorrow, in case you haven't yet. For those of you who are already experienced and advanced, I'm happy to talk to you after the session. So let's get started. First, a quick example. American Airlines, fairly well-known airline around the world, biggest fleet in the world, actually. They're well-known for customer centricity. They're also well-known for being very good with data. And this was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, way before it was cool. And they have a good reason to do so. So American Airlines sees a lot of their money coming from a small percentage of users. Half of the revenue comes from 13%, to be specific. Which is also why they have a heavy focus on things like loyalty, things like business users, business travelers, this small segment that drives a lot of value for their business. And this is basically the concept we'll discuss today. It's not specific to app or gaming, but it happens to be that the most advanced clients in that space tend to be gaming companies, and that makes sense for their business. But it's relevant for industries across the board. The first notion that I want you to take away is that not all customers are created equal. For a very long time, in the marketing space, let's say, there was talk about, the client is a king, client comes first. But the truth is, not every client is the same. Not every client is as valuable. And as the American Airlines case pointed out, some clients should be treated differently, and they are getting treated differently. In gaming, or in the app space, let's say, this is even more extreme. If anyone has ever been to any Google conference, you've for sure seen this slide. We present it all the time. It's just a quick overview. 70% of users, 85% of revenue. That's across the app world, kind of the ratio that we see. So 70% of users brings 85% of money for the business. For the game developers in the room, you'd probably be very happy if you had 17% of people bringing in the money. In the gaming world, we see 2, 3, 4, 5% of installers that become payers. So they bring in the revenue, and then for your big spenders, your whales, if this is 0.5%, you're probably also very happy because that'll also be a pretty healthy ratio. One thing I want to cover, and I'm going to try and avoid to be super mathematical for the next 20 minutes, but one thing I want to point out is the flaw or the law of averages. Looking at user value and average user value, and the data that comes with it. So you get a nice chart, and the two things actually I just wanted to take away is that there's two types of users in this case. Let's be very extreme and very theoretical. Let's say you have low-value customers and you have high-value customers. Low-value customers are worth about $10, high-value $1,500. This could be a very extreme casual game that you're playing. Most people are not spending at all. A few spend a couple of dollars, and then there's 2 or 3 people sitting in London, 5 in San Francisco, they're spending thousands of dollars. And if you look at your data as a whole, and you look at your user acquisition cost and the value that these clients bring, you may decide, oh, our average user is worth $76, $75 to our business. And this is awfully wrong. I mean, you're right, the average is $75, but that's not how you should be looking at your data. And yet, when we talk to advertisers, a lot of advertisers, this is exactly what they do. They say, we acquired 1 million users, we got 1 million installs. From that 1 million, we got 5 million back in revenue. We spent 4 million on costs. So this is great. So we have a nice, healthy 25% margin. But the truth is, you're probably losing money on 96% of users, and then you're gaining it back on this 4%. And that's OK for your business. Your bottom line looks green. But what if you thought about cutting costs on one end and focusing more on the high end? So that's what we'll talk about today. Quick definition. Going to skip over it pretty quick. Present value of future cash net flows, or net cash flows, associated with the customer. A few things I want to point out. Future net cash flows. So this is not just the first transaction. When we talk about lifetime value, we talk about all the transactions a user is going to make in its lifespan. This can be 3 months or 6 months if it's a game. This can be 3 years, 5 years if you're a retailer. This could literally be a lifetime if you're a bank, for example. And associated with the customer in bold, because all the other methods of measuring ROI, measuring ROAS, are all on an aggregate level, where you have a customer, and a customer is always the same. We want the customer, so an individual, unique person. Quick example of what we mean and what this looks like for the app and gaming world. You have 2 users, customers A and B. Which user is more valuable? So the one you acquire for $9 or the one for $19? Any guesses? A? Depends. Correct. Very good. A is definitely cheaper, though, so that's good. But the truth is you don't know. And so if you look at 1 month of data, which is pretty much the standard for most of our advertisers, you look at 30 days, you actually still might not know. So customer A might spend $10 on a one-off purchase, and customer B might spend $10 on a subscription. You don't know when it's going to churn, so you don't know if he'll spend in the 2nd month, 3rd month, 4th month, so you need more data. So profitability over time is the key. And 1 month of data simply is not going to cut it, essentially. The same example continued. So after a month's time, you decide user A makes a profit for my company. User A is great. User B, loss. User B, I don't want him anymore. So good and bad at this point. Look at it 2 months later. Subscription kicks in. Guy keeps spending, doesn't churn, doesn't die. After 3 months, you decide, ooh, actually, customer B was the one we should have focused on. And so this is what lifetime value is all about. Lifetime value is about looking at a longer period of time, stopping with ROI, stopping to think, ooh, after 30 days, I must have my numbers. There are other reasons that you could have it within 30 days. But if you look at it from a business point of view and from a profit maximization point of view, what you want to do is look over a longer period. A lot of game developers that I work with, primarily in Belarus, try and look over a full year. They do have targets after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. They want to hit these milestones. But generally, they say, we say a lifetime is a year, so let's try and make a profit over that period. Now, CLV or LTV, depending on how you're used to using it, customer lifetime value, how can it be used for your business? So my field and what I specialize in is the marketing side, but CLV can actually be used across different parts of the business. Marketing, I'll skip for now because we'll continue later on, but there's also finance and game design, and I'd like to point these out because they're a little bit less obvious. Customer lifetime value, super useful for things like profitability and cash flow analysis. The previous example showed, okay, user B is more valuable over time, over 3 months, and so the money comes in bits and pieces. But you pay a $19 upfront cost to acquire this user. So you might, at the end of the day, make more money with user B, but can your business handle it? Can you pay the $20 and wait a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year for this money to come back? So there's questions around that. So for a finance division, this can be super useful. The same on the acquisition side. Acquisition sits a bit on both sides. How much are you willing and able to pay for a customer, knowing that you're going to get the money back over an extended period of time? The third block is game design. I think this is the least used, but the most important. Game changes are common. Most game developers push a change every couple of weeks, every couple of months. How effective is a game change? A lot of people look at changes and try and look over a 6-month period. Okay, we made this change. The customer lifetime value of our users was, I don't know, $100. And now we see that money, after this change, money coming in has decreased. So we assume that the game change is bad. Probably not the most effective way. If you can predict, and the essence here is predict, so if you can already say after a couple of weeks, based on these indicators, the customer lifetime value is going up based on this change, you can make much more informed and much better decisions for your business. So marketing, finance, and game design should work together on the CLV topic, always. So this is key. All the clients that I work with are very good at this. The marketing guy talks to the creative guys, talks to the finance guys. They're basically one big team, and there's a lot of value coming out of this cooperation. Now, I talked about American Airlines, and I told you about 30% of customers bringing 50% of the money. So these are your top customers. The other 87% kind of seem like waste, as in there's still money coming in, but they're much, much, much less valuable. That's obviously not very fair. And generally what we recommend is you don't look at good customers and bad customers. You try and make segments. You try and make different levels and different buckets of users. So you look at an individual level, then you start thinking, okay, what do these users have in common? Same acquisition channel, same geo, male, female, demographics, age range. So you make different buckets of people with different values that they show. And then you can do different things. So if you're a hybrid customer with both an app and a desktop, for example, you're a travel client, you're a VPN service, you can start thinking about, okay, who are our high-value users on desktop, and can we get more money out of them by bringing them to the app as well? And then you push app ads towards them. You can look at users and say they're likely to churn, or users that have been playing your game that are never, ever going to buy any in-app purchase, so it's not going to happen. You start pushing ads towards them. So you can look at these different buckets and attach different actions, different messages, different content to these different groups of people. So the same with top audiences, you can try to push more towards them, you can give them deals. And on the acquisition side, which is the part where I sit, you can look at your top 10%, your top 20%, your top 2% of players, and find more users like them. And this is the key. So you find your golden customer, you find your big whale, your big spender, you look at what they're like, what are their characteristics, where did they come from, which channel drove them towards us, and then you try and find more like them. So this is kind of the look-alike, finding similar audience part of marketing, where that kicks in. Very quickly, kind of the measurement landscape, from where we started to where we are going right now. Cost optimization of a business, acquisition through CPC, CPM, kind of doing some marketing, spending money, not really knowing where it's going. That's where we started. Action and value optimization, that's where most advertisers and clients are today. So this is looking at a CPI, kind of knowing what the value of a user is, so having a vague idea of what your CPI should be, but looking at your users as an aggregate group. So saying that 5 million comes in, so we can spend 4 million as a whole. And then profit optimization, that's where CLV sits, so that's where we're trying to go. This is about making these segments, looking at individual users, splitting them up, and then optimizing towards these different buckets. Could be 2 buckets, could be 5, could be 10. Depends on how much data you have, how many users you have, and how many analysts or data analysts you have in your team. This slide we'll skip, but it's exactly what this looks like from a marketing point of view. So all the way from cost towards profit. These are kind of different benchmarks or different KPIs that you're probably talking about in your company. CPI, and more increasingly these days ROAS, I think is where 80% of the advertisers that we work with sit right now. CPC, those I would call the laggards. If you're still there, it's time to make a move. There's plenty of free tools, free measurement solutions, so there's no real reason to be stuck at this point anymore. And people are increasingly moving towards CLV as a topic. One quick data point, just in case you go back home today and your manager asks you, why should marketing talk to finance, or why should marketing talk to game design? There's an independent study by Forrester showing just that. So marketing people talking to finance people talking to game design. It's an 11-page paper. This is one line from it. So have a look at it. It's readily available online and quite cool to read. Now, industry examples and learnings. Players across industries, app, non-app. There's retail, there's finance. You have companies like Starbucks Coffee. All of them are using or are starting to increasingly use CLV as a concept. American Airlines we already covered. Capital One is one of my favorites and one of the most common cases. Capital One is big on credit cards, a big US company. Not kind of the traditional company you think about in customer lifetime value, but they have loads of data, obviously. And they have clients that are with them for years, 5 years, 6 years. I think this is their average turnover. And they're historically one of those companies that did a lot of quantity and a lot of quality. So they're trying to just kind of shoot hail in all directions, get a lot of users, get a lot of installs, get a lot of new clients, and then not much happens. So just kind of shooting around and hoping for the best, throwing a prayer. And they really turned it around. So Capital One is one of those companies that changed from quantity to quality, started using CLV, started focusing on that, and that worked greatly in finance. Dish we'll cover in a second. Companies like Urban Outfitters, much like American Airlines, they have a user base, 10-20% of people that spend 3 or 4 times more than all the rest. So they are also doubling down through loyalty programs on this group or this specific group of users. Starbucks I'd like to mention, because they were for the past 10 years kind of the weakest of all, let's say. So they were always used as an example of how not to do it. But in the past 5 years, they've really turned it around. So if you read old academic research on lifetime value, you will hear they have so much data, or could have so much data, and do nothing with it. But right now in the US, 40% of their users is using the Starbucks Gold or loyalty card. And they finally realized that the frequency of buying is not enough. So they also need to look at the transaction, what people are buying, they get their coffee, what do they buy with the coffee. So they look at these different combinations and are finally making the correct deals and giving people the right promotion based on that data. Tesco, not on the slide, in the UK, has always been seen as a trendsetter in this space. So they were the first with the Tesco Club card to really optimize and maximize value from their user base. Supercell, because I wanted to have a gaming client on here, because I figured a lot of you would be from gaming companies. They're also, well known in this space. We'll cover them a little bit later when we talk about Pokemon as a nice comparison. Dish. I have 3 examples here. Dish is one of them. They do satellite TV in the US. One thing I just wanted to take away from this slide, if you want free research and get a better understanding of how companies are going from being way behind to way ahead, there's an amazing video, 20 minutes, why your business is only as valuable as your customer, that you can see online. It's from Wharton Business School. It's by Professor Fader. Fader works closely with Google on all our customer lifetime efforts, and he does some amazing research. Also for the more advanced parties here, if you're already using customer lifetime value and you're moving towards predictive customer lifetime value, which is basically next level, he's the guy leading the research. And when it comes to codes and scripts and predicting this value, he has a lot of good content that you can get for free. So definitely remember him. And this was his initial case study. His algorithm to predict the value of users was better than Wall Street analysts' prediction of the value of a business. So his algorithm easily beat Wall Street, which is quite cool for a professor and one student working together. Farmers Insurance I will skip. One other example I want to give you is Airbnb. It's quite an old example, but also readily available online from 2014. So this was Airbnb in their hyper growth stage. They were actually a pretty typical advertiser with us. So they were trying to get new users through desktop, through the app, through all different channels. And they were also going for quantity over quality. So they said, okay, we want X million new users. This is our main KPI. And we're willing to pay X amount of dollars. Let's say $5 for this new user, up to the point where we questioned, why is it $5? And it was very similar to the example that I gave you, the very easy math sum. Oh, after a month, we generally see X value coming in. So they're actually the first client. They were a showcase client that we worked with to start doing data modeling together with them. So we cooperated with their data science team and started modeling CLV and kind of figuring out how much is a user really worth, how much can you really pay. And after they did this, they realized, oh, we can actually afford double the CPI. So we can pay twice as much for a lead because the money's coming back to us anyway, and our main KPI as a growth company is volume and users. So I'm sure a lot of you out here who are working with investors, generally the growth and the number of users that are active on the platform is pretty critical, just the same for Airbnb. CLV kind of leads you to 2 conversations, and these are the day-to-day conversations that I have with clients. You can use CLV, so once you start looking at individual users, once you start segmenting them, once you understand the value of your user base, there's 2 ways to go. So there's, for example, in gaming, the 95% of users that drives no value. Let's not target those anymore. That's one way to go. That falls under cutting costs and saving costs. And the other is increasing revenue. And this is the 5%. Who are they? Can we target them more often, more frequently? Are there similar people? So kind of find this user base and expanding it. These are the 2 ways to go. Most clients do both, so they try and cut the waste and reinvest it in the top clients. The key in all of this is profitability. So all customer lifetime value is about is profitability. Actually, if you think back about cost optimization, value optimization, and profit, the goal is always profit. We're just getting at a much, much better stage now where we can actually say, this user is going to bring it to you, this one's not, so please invest your money appropriately. One complicated slide, I'd say take a photo of it, because it's quite useful. We talk with a lot of clients about these buckets and these segments, and identifying your top users. And a lot of the pushback we get from clients, let's say, especially for gaming, is that there's only 2 or 3% of users that's buying, and then within that smaller group of users, you want us to look at an even narrower space, so an even smaller group of players, which is hard, because you're trying to optimize towards data. If you're familiar with AdWords and you're using AdWords, you want to use Conversion Optimizer, you need the data points, basically. And what we're advising now to clients is look for these high-value events, or basically big indications that a user will be a high-value customer for you. So if you're a gamer, let's say 3% decides to spend in your game, but someone that finishes the tutorial, makes some progress, reaches level 5, maybe you get to a 50% chance that they become a payer. Or someone has added payment options, someone has looked at your different exchanges for money. So maybe you have a $9.99 deal for 100 virtual coins. They've looked at the deal. What is the probability at this point that the user will become a spender? So look for these signals that are earlier in the funnel. That's one of the main conversations we're having today. Generally, just looking for 0.5% of your users and optimizing towards that is hard. So find these proxies and use this list depending on your industry. These are some examples. They're not exhaustive by any means, but a lot of clients that we talk to start from 0. It takes a lot of time. People need to look at the data, sift through data. You need a data analyst. So use this as a starting point and move forward from there. Pokemon Go. Not a single app presentation is complete without Pokemon Go, the biggest success of last year. I just wanted to give you an example. So we also work, not me personally, but we as Google work with Pokemon on user acquisition and on retention. Value creation app activities, so the previous slide that you saw. These are the 3 key events that a client like Pokemon would generally look at. So these are the kind of the funnel that they build. A lot of people install the game, never open it. So let's look at the tutorial to at least see this user is interested in the game and is not just doing it because, I don't know, his brother or sister or a friend is doing it. Spending virtual money, so once a player gets hooked on the game, you're trying to, I don't know, hatch that egg in Pokemon and you decide to spend money on it, could be an indicator, okay, this person is committed to the game. So these are the kind of funnels you should build to look at, yes, this is going to be a high-value customer, and this was an early signal, we're pretty certain about this. Of course, if you have 10 million installs and you think, I can figure it out on my own and go straight to the purchase, good luck, and let me know. Would love to hear it. OK. A few more slides on how to get started tomorrow. There's a few resources that I personally thought were super useful getting into the CLV space that I would like to share. One is a professor that you already heard about. This is Professor Faber, not sure how to pronounce it, who's the guy that worked in business school. He teaches MBA classes about customer lifetime value, so he generally knows what he's talking about. He has a book, Wharton Essentials, great read, like 1 hour, that talks to you about customer centricity on a senior level, basically. So as a business owner, you should hear about it, you should know about it. It's about 2 or 3 years old now, so Starbucks is still an awful case in that book. But in general, the theory behind it is sound, and he's also the one that's really just driving the field forward. So have a look at that. I don't have a book deal with him, I promise. But yeah, really worth buying. The other one is Avinash. Who of you has heard of Avinash? OK, a few people. That's good. I think if you haven't heard of Avinash and you're at Google, you shouldn't be at Google. So he's one of our evangelists, one of our main speakers. He's also an author, has several books, some related to Google, some completely neutral, just based on analytics. If you Google Avinash LTV, you should get an article, I think it's post 17 in his series, which is fully dedicated to lifetime value. He also has a guest that's on the blog. Really, really good stuff. So this basically explains the story that I told you today. It gives you the basics, gives you a background, and gives you a pretty good idea of where to start as a business, and a few good business reasons. So just like today, it kind of lists you why you should care about LTV and why your business should invest in it. One extra bonus, and that's a very ugly slide, but there's an Excel sheet inside this page that I just showed you, so inside Avinash's post, which gives you a basic model. So this is the basic LTV model and how to calculate it. There's also an advanced spreadsheet in the same tab, which I didn't show you because it wouldn't fit on the slide because it's about this long. But But if you're thinking about, okay, lifetime value sounds good, but I don't know where to start, have a look, because there's some really great material throughout the blog post, as well as in the Excel. So you don't need to build everything yourself. You don't need to be a PhD in mathematics or in statistics. You can just have a look, fill in the basic info, and then the model spits out the answer for you. Now, I talked for 25 minutes, probably a little bit too fast. So there's 4 things that I would like you to take away. Think about lifetime value and thinking about customer lifetime value. There's 4 steps. And if you want to start with LTV for your business today, I recommend you at least follow these 4 pillars as a general stepstone. So the first is customer value assessment. Stop using averages. Just don't do it. There's no point in saying that, oh, every user is worth the same. They're unique. So find your different segments, which is step 2. So build these different buckets. It could be 2. It could be your top users, your top 10%, and the other 90. If you have more data, try build 4 or 5. Group them by geo, gender, channel grouping, so where they came from traffic-wise. Think about it that way. Do custom targeting. Don't target everyone the same. If you have a user that's going to spend hundreds, give them their own message. If someone's likely to churn, send them a promotion. Do your social and email marketing magic on these kind of people. And fourth and final, high-value prospects. So find out who they are, find your top 5%, your top 10%, and find more people like them. Use them through user acquisition. Talk to us if you have a Google rep on how to find them. Talk to Facebook, talk to anyone, but just make sure you find them for your business, because they're at the end of the day going to make the difference. Cool? That's it from me. Thank you.